everyone. My name's Bernard, and I was working at Mosman Council for some 11 years actually, coordinating web services and online engagement and things like that. But I was fortunate to be based in Mosman Library, which meant that I could step aside from doing boring things like DA trackers and the like to work on history projects, which is a personal interest. Local public libraries obviously have a lot of challenges. Yeah, local public libraries are small and they have a lot of challenges. I'm sure you can think what they are. Basically, sort of limited resources, probably limited access to technologies, web technologies, or perhaps web teams or even platforms. But of course, they've got one amazing asset, one unique asset which no one else has, which is their local studies collection. I was privileged to work on an Anzac Centenary project over the last year, and most of these photos come from that. This is a pictorial honour board that we found in our local studies collection. Provenance was unknown, and obviously the no-brainer is just to put it on the web straight away. So we scanned them, uploaded them to Flickr. It's a very simple process, and as you know, Flickr is very, very cheap. And we annotated them briefly with the captions or what was listed on the actual board. This is why it's great to put things on the web. We've got a person saying this photo is of my grandfather, this photo is of our father. Now these are people that haven't searched our catalogue, they haven't even walked into our library. They've done, as in that great example you had there, they did a Google search and they've got access to our collections. Suddenly these photos are much more powerful and they begin to tell stories. This is a photo from a day we called Scanathon, where we invited people to bring in World War I related materials and we would scan it on the spot. It was a very successful day. One of the staff that was working, one of the team members on the day, said that they overheard a lot of conversations while they were doing the scanning, and a lot of people sort of expressed relief these photos are being digitised and preserved in some way. So here you see the friendly scanning team at work. A huge number of items digitised and brought into our collection and of course made available to others through the web. But I love this photo because on the far left you can see our local studies librarian Mary Lou in the sort of lime green type. Next to her are the daughter and granddaughter of the man standing in the middle of this photo. And this is an amazing story, and it's one of the many amazing stories, Sydney, World War I and the Anzacs. So seated on the left is a man called Frank Cluett. He was machine gun at Gallipoli and paralysed from the waist down. Standing in the middle is Frank Morris, the father of the lady you saw in the photo before. He was blinded by gas at Passchendaele. Those two men shared a house together at Balmoral after the war. The man seated, Frank Cluett, was an engineer and he built a motorbike and sidecar. So the paralysed man would steer the motorbike and the blind man would operate the controls. The historian Gavin Suter describes them as a sort of living war memorial. One of our eagle-eyed librarians cataloguing photographs after we met Frank Morris's daughter was working on this image of Balmoral, the Esplanade being built during the Depression. And she noticed that there's a man in a wheelchair. We were able to speak to Frank Cluett's daughter and identify this man. So this photo now has another meaning. It's a great photograph, but perhaps it has even greater significance now. And that's a great story too that's been rescued through this project. At the Scanathon we received a number of photographs that the descendants of the Anzacs had no idea what the subjects of the photo. So the niece of the woman in the centre of this photo brought this glass plate negative that had been sitting under a bed for 100 years. The interesting thing about this story is that we put this digitised image onto the Inside History Facebook page. So obviously there's an interest around Mosman for residents that live in the area now as to their Anzac history, and perhaps people that have moved from Mosman overseas or into other areas of Sydney. But I guess it's a fairly limited set of people to look at photographs or to contribute. By putting this photo into the Inside History Facebook stream, we had access to literally hundreds of people that were contributing to identifying the date, time and location of this photograph. So the main thing we wanted to know first was the name of the officer who's holding the nurse's Fox stole. And thanks to about 100 comments on that Inside History Facebook page, we could identify that Military Cross winner from WA. But the story is only beginning because we're not quite sure their connection. The nurse died a few years later in the United States, unmarried. This is another photograph that one of the people brought into our Scanathon. The daughter of one of the gunners in this photograph had no idea of the time and place. And again, through the Inside History Facebook page and that community online, we were able to identify not only the date, the circumstances of the photograph, but also identify the actual location. And this was from a Belgian woman who's interested in Anzac history, who through Facebook contributed to identifying this particular photograph. So I guess as we've heard, we really need to share items from the collection into other collections and other platforms and networks to be able to get the full benefit of sort of crowdsourcing this kind of information. I want to finish with a personal project to make 2 points really. The first is that the then and now is a classic way of illustrating historic photos, but I think it's one of the most powerful. And certainly with things like History Pin, etc., you've seen some fantastic work. But the other thing is that, to that point on citizen curators, this is a project that me and my partner took on. And this sort of work wouldn't have been possible. I should say first that this photograph is taken on the Greek island of Lemnos, where there were a number of Australian hospitals supporting the expeditionary forces on Gallipoli. Doing this wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't had access to a fairly decent digital copy of these photographs. The Australian War Memorial have a fantastic collection of photographs, but unfortunately they were digitising and publishing quite a few years back, and there was that fear that people would take photographs and use them. Some of these photographs that we've taken are actually shot at the Mitchell Library with a handheld camera, but this one in particular came from the Fryer Library in Queensland, and they made available to us when we asked a really high quality digital copy of this photograph. So we were able to go to Lemnos, we were able to use the background, the hills in the background, to identify, and I think for the first time, identify precisely where the hospitals were located on the peninsula. This photograph shows nurses' tents that have been blown down during the night. The wind just whistles over that peninsula non-stop. So in finishing, please make your photos available in good quality and high resolution so that your citizen curators can do some great work with them. Thank you.